All right, I've shared my screen here. Zach Millington's on the call as well, and I believe Laura Brown will be joining us shortly. If there's questions, we can work them either through the chat or raise your hand, and we'll be happy to walk through it. Each of those questions. I will kind of go through some of the key items first, and then we'll come back for questions near the end, and work the process that way, first off. So thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight's an important session, just as far as information, some change management that does impact you as associations, and it impacts our members and ourselves in how we process one, insurance and registration overall. And so it's more of an education, but looking at a collaborative approach. I'd ask to keep your items on mute unless you raise your hand and we go to you, just so for everyone's ability here. So this is a change management commitment, not only for us as the OHF, but we've talked with our members, had conversations with our members, and from that, we're making a commitment to overall change management, working with you as associations, working with the members, and moving forward. Can everyone see the screen? Just if there's some thumbs up, some people are saying in the chat they can't see the screen, so I'll just double check. Okay, lots of people can see it, perfect. Zach, you might be able to work with those individuals who can't see the screen right now and through the chat and work with them. So why are we here at this time? Last year, leading into the 23-24 season, they're coming out of the 22-23 season. Hockey Canada's insurance provider changed, and with the insurance provider changing, so do the rules. Expectations of a relationships that exist sometimes when you have a 20-year relationship with one partner, it doesn't exactly continue forward with the brand new relationship when that partnership ceases to move forward. So things have changed from the insurance perspective, which means we need to get the administrative processes in place to manage properly. This is about us being proactive and moving in the right direction. It's not about us being perfect. We know that this is going to be a challenging process as we move forward. I hear a lot of people who say they can't see the slides, and maybe what I will do is I will bump out of this sharing process and share a different way on my screen. People see the screen now? Okay.
I would like to have random chicken.
Okay, so as I was touching on, this is about being proactive and clearly communicating responsibility of all groups here, and it's about a collaborative approach. Where perfection is not the expectation. We know that we are working collaboratively to make incremental improvements along the way, and each step of the way is an improvement towards the overall registration process and the insurance process collectively. So just some terminology within the presentation that we're going to get into. Player evaluation registration. This is a pre-registration for player evaluation activities through the HCR that can include payment. Registered This is a pre-registration to an association that will enable an individual to be rostered and to participate with that organization. At this point of pre-registered or registered, the person is not rostered on a roster. It means that they are part of the association, but they have not been assigned to a team. Rostered, this is a process where a player, team official, or on-ice official and third-party instructor is placed on an active roster for the upcoming season for full participation. Screened is, this is the process of having a vulnerable sector check and a declaration submitted and cleared, and your HCR record checked against the ineligible list in order to be rostered. The checking of this does not apply to players. This is for our volunteers within the system. Recognizing that the check against the ineligible list occurs during the registered portion of the process, and then the vulnerable sector check and declaration are the trigger that you have to have them complete in order to be rostered. Participate and participation is to engage or take part in or off on or off ice activities that are sanctioned within the Ontario Hockey Federation, and sanctioned are on and off ice activities that are approved by the OHF, the member or association that participants are insured under the Hockey Canada program. So from that, this is sharing method is a little bit different. A little bit of the understanding of the insurance program. Hockey Canada purchases a general liability policy for all members and registered participants on a yearly basis, and that's based on an individual participant rate for each with the insurer of X dollars per participant. Hockey Canada then invoices the members for their proportion of the insurance cost based on an established fee roughly divided equally among the participants, players, coaches, and officials. The invoicing for the year-to-year is conducted slightly retroactively, and it's important to note this, and invoicing occurs on the actual numbers reported in the HCR. From a general point, our insurer expects that participants are registered before engaging in sanctioned activities, meaning that they have signed up to participate and accounted for in our records in the HCR. So that includes if they're going to participate for the first time in, tryouts, that you have a record of those individuals that are trying out within your organization or attending player evaluations. There is an expectation that all screening happens before there is any participation in sanctioned activity by team officials, on-ice officials, and third-party instructors. We recognize this year we're in a transition with the screening. The screening is coming in-house to the Ontario Hockey Federation, and that, it is a transitionary state from a process that was done by associations at different times and different times through the process. And, the time frame for this screening will continuously get pushed forward. But we do recognize there's some, pain points that do exist within our registration overall process. And we'll touch on those as we go through. And this is the important part why we wanted to inform all associations is, liability exposure, where does it sit? So if the OHF isn't communicating what the situations are to our members and ultimately down to the associations, we're putting ourselves in a liability exposure, not providing that information. If we're not complying with Hockey Canada requirements, we can be in liability exposure. Holding members and associations to unrealistic rules and expectations can put us in that. So that's why we're working back and forth on a plan for the 24-25 season, and then we'll have another process working with associations and our members to develop the 25-26 season. A lack of screening being completed before programming begins or prolonged time frame without screening by associations is a factor, and that's why we brought that process in-house, because we were aware of instances where it just wasn't occurring in an appropriate amount of time. Balance of policy between viability and safety. So measuring out that our goal is here safety and making sure the situation is safe, but it still has to be viable to implement and to manage as we go along. For the member side of things, and this is your 7 member partners that are part of the OHF, similar liability exposure requirements that exist. On the liability exposure side, though, for associations, It comes down to sanctioning program that has not complied with the safety requirements, not communicating or allowing communication to follow the rules in place, lack of screening being completed before programming begins, or prolonged time frame without screening by associations, and knowledgeably allowing coaches to operate programming unchecked and unsanctioned without clear communication to players. And we'll touch on this a little bit later as we go in. From a coach's perspective, where they're going to put themselves in liability exposure is operating programming prior to being properly rostered and potentially voiding players' insurance, not informing their participants if they are participating in sanctioned programming versus unsanctioned programming, and operating individual business programs without clearly informing players that it is not sanctioned and the insurance not sanctioned and the insurance that they have in place for that specific activity. Before I go on, I do want to stop here, and we will look for feedback and any questions on this component, because this is a key component for people to understand, have knowledge of, and if there's any questions on the liability exposure, I think it's important to touch base on that before we move on. So there's a question here, why did OHF can insurance providers? The OHF didn't can the insurance providers. Collectively, Hockey Canada buys the insurance across the board for all of our programming, and have for the last, as long as I've been in the game, but I'm going to say last 40 years of programming. It started out as a self-insured program, and it worked forward with an overall full insurance package that's in place. Some events came up, and AIG, who was our provider, made a determination to get out of the entire sport market. So not just out of hockey, they're out of the entire sport market due to volatility within the market. And at that point, we had to go and source out over a course of 6 months as a national federation, another group to identify to be an insurance provider for us. The sport market as it exists right now is not a friendly market to the insurance. Is not a friendly market for the insurance field. And in that situation, we're dealing with. We went, Hockey Canada as a collective, checked with every viable broker and insurer every viable insurer in North America. There were no individual insurers in North America that were interested in involving themselves in the market, and they had to go to the London market over in the UK. And ultimately, that's where the insurance provider has come through with AXA. The insurance program that's in place is as close to what it was with AIG as any program that was there from the standpoint of our associations. Your insurance still is, I would consider the best in sport from a protection standpoint of not-for-profit organizations and actions. The difference is that we need to move forward with organizations, operating within policies that we have in place and making sure that we're validating those policies that are in place and not working outside those policies. Another question here on this one is briefly, what is an example of an unsanctioned team activity? Well, if you have a coach that's operating your team in the wintertime, and then they are running their own skills programming, and it's not with the team, but it's not an actual sanctioned activity that the association has sanctioned, and the individual is not a validated third-party instructor, then that would put someone in the being an unsanctioned team activity. If it's something that is so that's an example where players might think this is part of my Hockey Canada program when I bought into with the association, but technically it's operating under that individual's personal business, and they're not insured in that situation. It's important for them to know, and that's as associations knowing, hey, have we sanctioned this ice time? Have we sanctioned these activities? If not, you generally would come forward to the OHF and ask for an insurance cert for a third party group that you were going to do operations with. Question was, why would a coach who wasn't properly rostered invalidate a player who was properly rostered? Well, the aspect is if you put a coach on the ice that wasn't rostered, and that coach, hadn't passed their screening or hadn't passed their situation, and for whatever reason would have been deemed ineligible by their screening, and something occurred on the ice, one, as an association, having knowledge that you have someone on the ice that's not rostered, not screened, not properly put on the ice, could expose you to a situation where, it based on an action of that individual or an action on the ice, it may not be an insured situation. So I'll give you a rough example of that is a coach, doesn't get on the ice because they have a VSC that indicates that they have an assault with a weapon, but they didn't submit their VSC. You let them on the ice before that, and then they assault a player on the ice. All of a sudden, you have knowledge of letting someone on the ice because you let them on the ice not improperly screened and validated. That individual potentially puts you as an association at liability. So it's about working towards making sure that we're narrowing that gap on when people are on the ice and when they've submitted their information and been validated to be on the ice. The secondary component of this is that one of the items that we did that Hockey Canada had to deal with in this is that they had to provide an affidavit to the insurer that the HCR was the true record of insurance. So that is where the true record of insurance is if individuals are on the HCR. And moving forward, that's a component of the new insurance requirements. And so that pertains into this. They understand that, there are some gaps in those processes, and we're working to close those gaps with you as associations. Some of what we launched in the bulletin was around those gaps and nailing those down so they're narrower, and we're moving forward in our process to be better. So the question was, are fundraising activities covered? Dryland, yes, those activities are covered. Not all fundraising activities. And Zach, who's on the call, Zach, there's an insurance cert request process, and then there's a policy on insurance within the OHF. Those things would have to be, put in for an insurance cert to be validated in that situation. So an example, I can tell you that, something that wouldn't be insured as a fundraising activity is, we're going to have a group of people go out and clean up brush and use a wood chipper. We're not going to insure that. That's not a hockey activity, and the dangers of that are too high. That someone could get injured, and there could be an injury in that situation. So as we move forward, third party question was, question was, what are we to look for in a third party program? They hold their own insurance or ensure they are registered or insured through Hockey Canada. Moving forward, third party providers that wish to provide programming to sanctioned teams do have to register with the OHF. And what I would suggest is those third party providers would then come on your ice, and that way they have paid their insurance to be insured by Hockey Canada for the activity on your ice. So they have a separate process where they have to conduct their VSC and screening through the OHF, and at that point they can be eligible on the HCR, and then you can assign them as part of your third party at large instructors for your association. We recognize third party instructors have their own insurance, and that insurance is for when they're running their own programs and dealing with their own programs and people are going into their buildings. But in all instances, a lot of them don't carry their own enough insurance that would cover off our players in those situations and validating that. So we're narrowing that gap to make sure that anyone who's coming on the ice is insured in that situation in our programming, and that you're, as you work with those organizations, they're moving forward in a proper way with the proper protection for the players that you have in place. So the insurance will not move back to September. It will be June to June. It will operate on the Hockey Canada fiscal timeframe. It got adjusted to June to June from what was a March 31st, April 1st, or March 31st to March 31st, which didn't make sense in the middle of playoffs for us to be reissuing insurance certs. So insurance will continue to run June to June, and we'll be building some plans out to deal with spring evaluations next year. And the goal to get participants registered, earlier into the system, into the HCR, and working with your members and Hockey Canada to make sure that that tool is available to you in the best possible way. So there's a question here: if you are unable to get coaches to commit prior to teams being separated after rep tryouts in a C center, how are we meeting these targeted timelines? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that. Tammy, if you want to come off mute and just maybe clarify that, be happy. Well, Tammy comes off, I'll move on to the next one. Our preseason camps covered. Some of our families registered for it through HCR and others pay at the door. If you've registered for them, the registration process should be on the HCR. If you haven't paid at the door, you still need to register them on the HCR. One of the values of registering on the HCR is they are signing off the waivers on Rowan's Law for that. They are signing off the waivers of Hockey Canada and the waivers that you have in place. So in that initial standpoint, it'd be ideal, even if they're paying at the door, they would do the registration online and you direct them in the registration online process. If an association is not aware of unsanctioned activities, who is ultimately liable? I mean, the ultimate liability on that's going to come down to someone who does know. I mean, if you have a coach that's operating outside and not making you aware of it, your job is to do the best that you can do in your situation to ensure that the organization, your coaches are running sanctioned activities. If for some reason something's not occurring, then we understand that, that's where insurance is to come in, is when mistakes happen or something occurs in that situation. Our job is to mitigate as much as possible to ultimately long-term keep our insurance rates down by, knowing our situations and helping out situations. And two, knowing that we have, followed our policies in the processes. The liability, I mean, the insurance is there. It's there to protect you if you're acting in good faith and acting in the best way possible. This is not saying that, so something goes wrong or a mistake happens and there's a non-sanctioned activity on the ice and it could void all the insurance, players' insurance. If it's knowingly being done, it may not void the player's insurance. That will be up to the insurer, but it may void the coach's insurance in that situation. If the coach does something that, isn't in accordance with what the regulations or policies are of the association meaning that they step on the ice prior to have their screening and having that completed in process. So we recognize the OPP and in Toronto, there is a longer period of time on the screening for the return. We wanted to touch base here, and a key item in this and a discussion point in this is that, we would ultimately like the coaches to follow the process, have their VSC done and their declaration, which they are doing online now. They don't have to fill out a separate declaration and submit it. It's part of the portal process. We would like it done all as one. If it's not done and you know that you have a long waiting period, then the option is to do the declaration through the form and submit the receipt that you started your process. As associations, we ask that you do it once, because then we're not following up with you in 3 or 4 weeks in December 1st by that time and removing individuals from the ice that don't have their VSCs submitted in place by that time. And two, in the process, there is from our end. There's more administrative cost if we have to look at that individual, 2 and 3 times because, they submit the receipt in. We built that in, we understand that, but ideally we want to get out in front of these individuals, and we need your support to get out in front of these individuals to, get through the process of applying for their VSC and, getting back, those items as early as possible before they start their season. For the competitive coaches, and we'll get into this information's been out since April 1st. So the fact that they haven't gone and done it, is a lack of communication somewhere, or a lackadaisical approach. And that's something that we need to adjust and change. And, we'll work with that. But we will accept, and it's not, but we would ask that as associations, you try to guide individuals not to go through the process and submit in their receipt and do the declaration online first. Get them to see if they can get their vulnerable sector check back in time. And then if they don't, they can submit their receipt in that process. Are there any questions on that? Does everyone understand? So someone asked, what about preseason camps held this month by a fully rostered team, fully rostered coaches, OHF VSC approved coaches? Is this sanctioned and covered? Yes. So the sanctioning and covering we'll kind of get into is the programming that you've approved with your rostered teams and rostered coaches that you've put into the HCR. That is sanctioned hockey. If there's something that's very different in that sanctioned activity that you're providing, you would request an insurance cert request. So if you're asking to do a fundraiser that's, kids standing in a mall and selling chocolates, right? You would work through your member to submit forward a insurance cert request for that specific topic. If you're asking for third-party insurance for attending a third-party program such as dryland training, etc., you would work through your member again to submit those in. Scott, you got a question there? Or a statement?
Yeah, Phil, thanks. I just wanted to clarify or add an extension to what you just said. There are limitations, and I think that's where you're going with this. There are limitations to what can be approved, right? So a team retreat at an away camp, for instance, not everything there is going to be covered through the insurance policy. Even if the organization knows it's going on and says, yeah, go ahead, we approve, that doesn't necessarily mean every single activity they do while they're there is covered.
Correct. So you'd have like your hockey activity, if it's specific hockey, if it's specific dry land, but if you decide at the overnight camp you're doing archery, we're not covering the archery. It's not a hockey related activity. So Scott's right. So if you're doing those type of preseason activities, you would want to verify what things are covered through our insurance, and then is there insurance through the camp or overnight group there on the other items. So someone, I'll come back to you in a second, Matt. Is your question on that specific item, Matt? Matthew Gross?
Yes, it is.
Okay, go ahead.
International tournaments, like going to the States on a properly applied for permit.
So you will have Hockey Canada insurance. Saying that, there is advisement that you also pick up a cross-border insurance as well. And Hockey Canada works with the team. So if you are doing that, Hockey Canada would work with you through BFL. They have a program that works for cross-border insurance in those situations as well.
Great, thank you.
Question was, what is the real turnaround time to have OHF approved VSS? Rostering is held up until this comes through. Who is told when the VSS is approved? Our turnaround time, and Zach, I'll defer to you. The last time I checked was under 4 hours, but And Zach, can you pipe in there, maybe let us know how long we're taking right now?
Yeah, it's usually within a few hours that if everything is good, then the screening will be approved and updated on the HCR profile. If there are issues, then it may take 1 to 3 business days, and that's when one of our OHF staff will follow up with the individual directly to rectify the issue that may be there in place. But right now, it's usually within a few hours, but we're still kind of saying 1 to 3 business days is the turnaround time for a screening to be approved.
So, Matthew, you still have this, another question, or is it just didn't put your hand down?
Yeah, just didn't put the hand down. Sorry, I'll take it off.
Ross, sorry, Lee, I'm not sure if it's Ross Hayton.
Yes, hi, it's Lee. Just a quick question. When the approvals are put on their profiles through HCR, is there any way that a notification can be sent out? Like if a member applies for a transfer out of our area somewhere else, I'll get a note from HCR saying member transfer, blah, blah, blah. Is there any way that when that is updated, that we can get an email notification to save us having to keep looking and looking and looking?
Not
You know
at
what I
this,
mean?
not at this point, there's not. We are working with Hockey Canada to continue to improve that notification process. I would
Okay.
suggest that your coach knows when they've put their submission in, and if they would look within 1 business day, they would see something back up there. If they put their submission in and something was wrong with their submission, they do receive an email back indicating that it was invalid or incomplete.
Okay, just like you're trying to save time in re-looking at profiles, so am I. So if I had a notification and I saved them, then I could, go back and say, sorry, Joe, you're wrong. You haven't submitted, I can call them on it versus just taking their word for it. But okay, thanks.
Absolutely. And on the screening, one of the biggest areas, and Zach, you can pipe in here if you have any other comments on it, is, it's really on reading error of the individual. So we have some people who are uploading the information to Sportal into their HCR account. That's not where they're uploading, so they're not following the steps and walking through the process. We have removed one aspect of the human error, which was people uploading either a VSC or a declaration. Now they're completing the declaration online and then just have to upload their VSC. So it's narrowed out a number of cases. But if you're working with your coaches, just really notify them that if they're going through the process and they're not getting an answer and they've uploaded to their Sportal account, that's the wrong spot to upload the document to. Cindy?
Yeah, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. My question was on the sanctioned events, non-sanctioned, fundraising, insurance. I'm just wondering if you have some quick links or where we can find all this information to share with all our managers and coaches.
Sure, Zach, if you can either put into the chat, I think there should be a link to the OHF insurance policy or insurance guidelines. That would be one.
Yeah, I just put in the Hockey Canada sanctioning guidelines into the chat, which give a good list of what's covered, what's not covered under insurance.
So that's the what is not and what's covered in insurance. The other aspect that we're talking about here a little bit more is about our process to meet our requirements to get individuals rostered and through the screening process. So meeting that requirement of that policy so that we're not offsiding that policy if something comes up. Rachel?
My mic.
Yep.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to go back to the tournaments that are in the States. Where do we apply for that, or where do we get Hockey Canada guidance on getting outside insurance? I've never done that before. We've had teams go across before. Nobody's ever notified us that we needed something else.
Well, so I mean, like the Hockey insurance covers you for the hockey portion, the hockey activities and that, but if you're doing any other activities while you're in the States, then, you know, your own insurance, so that's where there's a package to get picked up for that. And Hockey Canada, so I would work back with, your specific members, insurance individual, that guides that, and then they'll work in with Zach and, VFL. You can also pick that up from, you know, Blue Cross or any other, CAA, different groups, like there's insurance through those groups, and lots of groups pick that up as a supplemental insurance for those situations. So like if you have a group that's going to, you know, going to a sporting event or activity or something that's different, that's not connected to the specific, you know, hockey activities that they're there for, then that may be something that's not necessarily covered in that situation. And, you know, that's where you'd have it looking for the other insurance. So if you're, just gonna go through a couple more questions and I'll get back to the presentation because we have an hour here set aside. So, the question was, does insurance cover all year or end of after Alliance Championship? So yes, insurance covers us from June 30th to June 30th. Okay, so once it's put in place, it's covered from that time frame. We will get into more of the details around that. So, you know, once an individual is registered, then they're in the position of they are ready to participate, and that will move forward. What won't be covered is, under our regulations, we don't cover programming in July. July and the first 2 weeks of August is a break from programming. That's a policy we have in place. So if you're running programming in July and the first 2 weeks of August, that's not going to be covered programming unless it's sanctioned specifically through your member in that situation. As we continue forward, you know, we'll get more clarity on that and build around that for the 25-26 season, since, you know, that issue's, you know, predominantly out of the way for this year. But yes, if you're running programming in the spring, there is programming in the spring. So we do have some associations that run 4-on-4 programming in the spring that everyone registers and gets sanctioned for. That would be covered. If your team is approved in the spring and then they're participating up until June 30th, which is allowed in the process, you know, as long as they're rostered and getting, and the coaches are, you know, have completed their process of being registered in accordance with the rules, then that would be covered off. So those issues are kind of a target for next year. We're not going to get into them in detail tonight, because we're going to bring some groups of associations in to build those plans for next year. I'll leave it to Laura if there's any other questions I missed on the liability that are key to, or Zach to identify those to me. And we can come back to them. I'm going to continue on with the overall questions on how we determine insurance, determine insurability. So just so this group knows the process we walk through. So every time there's a, you know, a lawsuit or a situation that comes into the insurer, so a human rights case or a different situation, the first question that's asked is, has the insurance premium been paid? So when a player is registered, okay, even though we aren't collecting the money from you in, you know, April or May or June, we collect it, your member collects it, and then we collect it in November timeframe, the insurance premium is paid if they are registered. So similar to your house insurance where you can pay on a monthly process, Hockey Canada prepays and they collect the money back from us at a later date. So the key there is being registered. So person being registered. So is the individual registered? That's the next question. Were they, you know, do they participate by registering and saying, hey, I have paid my insurance to be part of the programming and I'm a registered participant? 2 was the activity of sanction, or 3 was the activity of sanction activity. And lastly, were the policy and regulations followed respecting safety? So lots goes into that, but even if all four of these questions are answered yes, right? There's still maybe exclusions to any policy, and all claims are subject to those exclusions. So we have certain exclusions for individuals that are on our absolute no list. We have people who cannot ever participate in the game of hockey ever again. That's why we do the check on the system. And if that individual comes up, then they're eliminated from playing. You can't register that individual and participate, or sorry, from coaching or being part of the program. So just going to each of those questions slightly here, is payment is not required, registration is. We have situations where players aren't getting registered until well after they've been participating in program. We have the same case with team officials and on-ice officials. So the big gap we're trying to close here is the registration gap connected to insurance aspect. Is individuals are on the HCR, as soon as they register, then they're eligible to hop on the ice and participate in the ice. That registration can be through the player evaluation registration or registered on the HCR to be invoiced per their position. Registration doesn't necessarily mean they paid, because you could set it up so they registered on the HCR and you collect money by check. If that's still your process and you don't do online registration, online payment, they're still registered once you get registered, knowing that we're collecting the money from them moving forward. Any questions on that? I'm assuming, Rachel, your hand's up from before. If not, you can pipe in. Is the individual registered in the fall? So, sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
Did have another question. We have a coach who submitted his declaration with his vulnerable sector check from last year, and the end date was put in, I think, incorrectly. So now it's saying that the declaration expired. Who do we contact to have that looked at?
Send a note to Zach.
Okay.
So is the individual registered for the fall? One of the things that we do get into is we have new coaches coming into the system. Those coaches aren't necessarily registered, and some associations may have registered individuals and then checked off their waivers for them. One of the gaps this does, by forcing a registration process for your coaches, they sign on, they check off on their waivers, they check off on Rowan's Law. From that aspect, they've validated those waivers and put them in place. It doesn't put you in a negative position as an association if you didn't maintain the proper document, didn't have a document in place. The person says, I didn't check that waiver off. And then all of a sudden you're going, well, you did to be a coach, but you don't have record of it. This way, the coach goes in, registers, they check off all the waivers that are required by your association, by your member, by OHF, Hockey Canada, and by the government of Ontario on those requirements that we have to have in place. So that's a gap that we have, not necessarily for players. Most players are registered before they're stepping on the ice because that you register them for their programming. We may have some individuals that aren't. And if you have a situation where you have individuals you know of that aren't being registered before, work with us. We'll help you try to figure out a solution to narrow that gap as we move forward. Was the programming sanctioned? So validation from the member that an event was sanctioned within the policies of Hockey Canada and the member. I say in here validation from Hockey Canada and the member. That's the wording from the perspective of the insurer. In our situation, we are wanting to make sure that as associations, you're aware of your team calendar. So if you have a U13 AA team and they have a team calendar of activities that they're doing, you would want to know what their team activities are for the year. And then if there's anything that's a question mark, you can at least inform the question mark on that. This isn't a requirement to, upend things. We're going to continue to work with our members on how best to track this. For an example, though, I know there's a bunch of groups that use sports heads as their scheduling program and scheduling materials, you know, that would act as your sanction, you know, validation of sanctioned activities that you've put in place and validated. And if there's anything that was a question mark, if they followed the process to come to you to get the validation, then we move forward with that. So what you want to avoid is that teams believe they're sanctioned and they're not. So if someone was participating in, you know, July and August of this year, thinking they were all sanctioned, ready to go, and they weren't, that's a gap. Now, there's a difference for different levels of hockey, but for our majority of hockey, that those 2 months, that month and a half is an off time frame. And so ultimately, that's going to narrow out the process longer term. And I can tell you from an insurance perspective, when we go through this, we deal with this on every single case. That question comes up, was this a sanctioned game or activity or program? And then we have to go back and make a validation and verification of that and making sure it's in place. So it's just something of building in that, you know, the sanctioning process is there. With our members, we're not forcing our members to be the individuals, the OHF members, to sanction every single activity and force everything through them. If that's a process that's determined, that's fine. We're looking at, you know, making sure that there's just a general knowledge that's built and starting to narrow the gap of activities that are going on that may not be, you know, within our sanctioned area, and people at least know that they're putting themselves in that position not to be insured in those situations. And it's the transparency that's important there. And then were the policies followed? So obviously in this situation, we're looking at the screening policy, penalty regulations, etc. Were those situations followed? Equipment, was someone wearing a throat protector or not wearing a throat protector? Were they following the rules and regulations of the game in that situation? So, you know, the gap we're seeing right now for us, the biggest one right now, is there's many individuals that were participating in programming prior to being screened. And we had individuals that were participating in programming for the entire year without being screened. And that's something that we need to narrow that gap on. And that's part of what we're working with the collective group here on. How do we narrow that gap year over year to make sure that we're having individuals on the ice properly screened, you know, as soon as they are touching the ice. Kyle, you have a question?
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Just wanted to reiterate back to the VSS stuff. I kind of missed a little bit. I know there's a lag in getting the approval back from the police when they first apply with the OHF declaration. And you had said, if I'm correct, that those coaches, volunteers, etc., are to apply on the Sportal through OHF with that second declaration and a receipt saying that they have submitted for approval. Is that correct?
Yes, in areas that are known that the police departments are behind. So we know in Toronto, they're about a month and a half or so. So if you're in Toronto Police Services and that's where you're getting your VSC done, they're about a month and a half right now. So
we're Midwestern Ontario, and it's 4 to 5 weeks, I'm told, in our area.
Some are in the OPP. What you'll kind of see in the next slide, the target of what we're looking at for the fall here, and guiding that process. So, but yes, we will accept that they have a receipt and they submit that. So they go on the portal, complete the declaration, and submit the receipt. We would validate that and then move forward with those individuals as of December 1st. If they haven't submitted their vulnerable sector check at that point.
What was the date? December 1st?
December 1st.
Okay.
You'll see this on the next slide as we're moving forward. So
yeah, because same as some of these other organizations, we're like scratching to get coaches and not everybody has this stuff. So it's kind of a start of September. All of a sudden we got to get all this info out to new coaches and stuff like that. So I just want to have an avenue to get them going and make sure it's known to them that it's important, obviously. But
Yeah.
we hear back that it's 4 weeks and they got to go on the ice next week. You know, it's kind of handcuffs you.
So the other component of that is if they have a vulnerable sector check from any other activity that they've dealt with in the last 6 months,
Like school trip, etc.
school trip, they have a vulnerable sector check that they've completed in the last 6 months, they can submit that with a declaration. That's all they need. So
Okay.
we're not requiring a brand new one. If it's within 6 months, it's eligible to be utilized and used. If they submitted it last year to your organization and you have it on file, you can provide last year's to them and they can submit that with a declaration.
Yeah, I remember that when it first came out. Was there also a new updated declaration that you sent in to the OPP or police from the actual original email where it had more info required to fill out, like what your position was, what your organization was? The first one, I believe it was just kind of a broad paragraph and you just put your name in.
I'll defer to Zach on that. I don't believe there has been a change, but maybe if someone's having an issue, I know that I've sent them to Zach and he's updated it. So go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, there is a new letter requesting a VSC that's available on our website now, which has more information that you fill out, like your member, your age group, your level, your position on the team. Because it seemed like the OPP especially was asking for more information from individuals when submitting their application for a VSC. So that's available on our website.
Yeah, we switched that over because I think we had a few kickback with the old original one. What do they mean by member? Is that like a volunteer, a coach, or the organization, or OMHA, or what does that mean?
Yeah, that's your member partner. So OMHA, GTHL, Alliance, NOHA, etc.
Perfect. Perfect. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.
So moving forward, I mean, the core of what we're looking at for the 24-25 season, that's this year. And we'll make some adjustments with the association's input for the 25-26. But all those competitive individuals, so people who are coaching our competitive level teams, NDD, Double D, all the way through to junior, those individuals have had this information and knowledge to start the process back in April. Especially those who have spring evaluations, they will need to, get completed their screening by September 1st, 2024, or else they will be ineligible to participate. And so they will need to be on a roster. And in order to be on a roster, they'll have to have their VSC process completed and validated in that situation. They also have to be registered and validated. For recreational coaches, so talking about our house league, local league, select, and all tiers within U7 and U9 age divisions, the team officials and players must be registered before participation. Again, that key focus on registering so that they're in the HCR. Team officials need to complete the screening within 3 weeks of registration. So Kevin, recognizing and for lots that there may be some groups outside of that completion is then if you are in a delayed area, submitting your receipt through the portal process. Nick?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Topic 1, all competitive categories, inclusive MD, blah, blah. Our MD tryouts are not till mid-September. So how can we roster players when we haven't held the tryouts yet?
So if you're running fall evaluations, then you would register them under player registration for, player evaluation registration. You're eligible to get on the ice for that. If then you form the team, then you get them rostered. before they start participating. So it's the turnaround time from the assignment of that to, you've finished the player evaluations. We formed our team of 15 from that player evaluation. Put them on roster.
What, it says here, team officials and players not rostered by September 1st. So what do I have to do for my MD tryouts, evaluations, or whatever you want to call them?
So do you have coaches already identified for those teams?
We do.
Okay, so you have a roster.
I
Those
don't,
coaches,
there's no players because we haven't held tryouts yet.
but from your end, those coaches should have completed their VSCs.
They have, the coaches aren't the problem. It says team officials and players not rostered by September 1st. We're not holding tryouts till mid-September, so there are no players.
And so that's fine. So when we're dealing with that group that you haven't formed a team yet, you're doing fall registration and fall evaluations. They would register for player evaluations in the fall. So you're going to deal with them separately. Your team officials, you know who they are.
Yep.
Put them on the team roster because that will validate if the team can go. You would add the players then following the evaluation process.
Okay, the team officials are fine. Where do the players get registered? Like just I create a registration on my own home website, or is there something on the HCR?
On the HCR, if they pay for tryouts, there's a registration process on there. If you need support in that, specifically send it in. We'll get someone from Hockey Canada, or your member can support you in that. But there is a function in there where in the store you create, MD player evaluations. It can be free, it can be a cost, and they register through that. They sign the waivers off, and then you have a record of those individuals that have participated in the player evaluations.
Does it have to go through HCR, or can I create a tryout form on my own website?
Well, you can. In the end, you're going to want to have those players in the HCR to some degree, or a record of those players that's there. So the example is, say you had 75 players on your ice, and there's an incident on your ice, and one of the players that it was on your ice doesn't ever register with you later on, go somewhere else, and that player gets sued because of the action on the ice, right? Where's the record for that individual player in that process? So it's a balance because our insurance covers both sides, the individual who is being sued and the individual who is injured, right? So ideally, we want to get to the point that this is being done in the HCR. If in the short term, your solution is that you are doing it via the process and then have a record and maintain that record right now for this, season, we'll work with you on that. But ideally, there is a mechanism and tool there in the HCR to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Ross, or sorry, Lee?
Yes, thanks. Okay, so our association, we do use HCR for registration. We have got our coaches in place for the main coach, and of course they probably have coaches in mind to help them. We do discourage them from announcing that because then it makes it look like the team is already picked for like the top 4 players. So they may or may not have all those in place. Now, as long as they get the information into you, because here in London, we don't have the long delays, I'm confident that they will be in the system prior to tryouts or shortly after, but they won't be on the ice. We've told them that. So my question though is this September 1st deadline and the word roster is kind of they'll be all registered, players and coaches, once we pick the teams, but they won't be rostered. So as long as they're registered, even if it's after September 1st, and they are participating appropriately, they're covered. Is that correct?
Okay, so we will provide a clarification on this. This line, and I will adjust it and move forward. This is for teams that are formed already prior to September 1st. If you're forming teams after September 1st in a competitive category, your coaches need to be rostered. your players need to be registered for the player evaluation standpoint. When they start playing and participating, then they need to be rostered. So once they're operating and participating as a formal team, that's when they need to be rostered.
Okay, that is a difference. So, okay, that helps me. Thank you.
We will make that adjustment for the fall programs that are in place there. Jeremy, you have a question?
Yeah. This town contact position is new for me, and I'm hearing a couple different ways to go about this declaration and the new VSC. Can you explain to me what a coach has to do or a team official has to do prior to going on the ice? Like, there's this declaration and a VSC, and is there something else, or do they go online and do this and then do the VSC online, or how does that work?
Okay, so an individual who wants to be on the ice first should submit to their police services. And on the site, there's a guidance to which police services you go to. Is that OPP or is that your city police department? You submit for your VSC to be conducted there and completed. Once you receive back your VSC, if there's not a delay with the police services, then you would submit in through the portal. And if you submit in through the portal, and while you're on the portal, you are filling out the declaration online and uploading the VSC. If for any reason you're in an area where it's taking a delay to get back the VSC, you have the ability to upload the receipt that you've initiated the VSC into the same portal, and you would have completed the declaration in that portal. The declaration is not a separate document anymore. It is an online answering of questions in the portal during your submission process.
In the OMHA portal?
No, this is in the OHF portal.
Sorry,
Jeremy, yeah. If you want to walk through this specific process, or anyone does require a walk through this, I would say send an email to Zach Millington, and he would then probably set up a time to walk everyone through that process.
Okay, yeah, I didn't want, I was going to say that next. I don't want to tie your time up tonight with this, but I do need somebody that's well up to speed on this to take me through this.
And Zach will be able to walk you through it, or walk a group of people through it. And he's looking to host some sessions anyways, to answer any questions for individuals and coaches.
So just email Zach?
Email Zach and he'll work and support you through that.
Okay, thanks.
So then from the recreational standpoint, we're indicating 3 weeks. This is a target balanced approach we're looking at. If you're in an area that it is not going to work at 3 weeks, we understand that. Get the information in through the receipt. Our goal is associations have individuals that are screened in and around the dressing room areas during the grace period. So if you're running a house league and you have a convener, that convener should be in and around, or other people who have been coaches to ensure the rule of two is protected in the dressing room. So the rule of two is having at minimum, in the worst case scenarios, someone who is VSC screened and another adult that's working with the program. An individual who is not screened shouldn't be in the dressing room alone with any players. Third-party instructors, there is a process on the VSC where they submit into us. Once they're done, there is a bulletin that was submitted out where each of your associations are to create a third-party instructor at large, similar to if you do a coach at large roster, and then you can add them to that third-party at large roster. Carolyn?
So in looking at the U7 and U9 age divisions, when we're looking at individuals needing to be screened to get into the change room, what about like the parents going in to tie their young ones' skates? Where does that place them?
No, the core is ensuring that we have 2 screened people in the dressing room. We understand parents do come in the dressing room, but you should have the 2 screened individuals in the dressing room as well.
Okay.
And validating that. So this is not we're not screening every parent that's going into the dressing room. Our responsibility is we have 2 screened individuals that if something inappropriate is occurring or they notice something that's not appropriate, that they can address that situation and stop it.
Thank you.
So any individual that submitted a receipt must have that receipt. They're validated they're validated VSC done by December 1st. There may be exceptions to this. Obviously, that if someone's going through fingerprinting, sometimes it takes 3 to 6 months on fingerprinting. We recognize there are situations. So as long as they have, December 1st, they don't have the VSC back, but they have communication back from the police department indicating that it's still in process, then we'll work with associations and teams to deal with that. And the goal here is, as you're looking forward, any individual registering after November 15th will need to provide the fully completed VSC, and receipt will only be accepted in the receipt will only be accepted in exceptional circumstances. So, as you're continuing forward in this process, it's about communication out, start the process, go get it done, get it completed if you need to have it completed. I know that's a lot of information. We will adjust bullet number 1 and make that explanation and provide out a change to that. Laura, you and I can touch on that tomorrow and make that change. And I'll go to Laura if there's other questions, but someone who's listed as administrator, I'll take your question now.
Thank you. I'm still not clear 100% on the third party, and I have a couple of my third party gentlemen asking me. Could you explain that a little bit to me? I know they need a VSC. That's the easy part, but what else do they need when it gets to this insurance? Say they don't have their own insurance. How does they get insurance? Do they go on our roster and we pay for it, or?
So no. So the third party instructor would register directly with the OHF. They pay
register, okay.
They pay $50 to do that
Okay.
registration, submit their VSC in.
Okay.
That's their insurance to Hockey Canada and any administrative fees.
So they pay, that's them paying their insurance, that $50?
And they will get assigned an identity as a third party instructor.
Okay.
We are paying the insurance through
Okay.
that registration there. If
Okay.
they're on your third party instructor at large
Yes.
roster, which they would have to be a third party instructor to be on it,
Right.
you're not paying insurance for those individuals.
Okay.
They've met the requirement. They're being paid through the OHF directly to Hockey Canada.
Okay. Do they have any other things they have to take? Do they have to have respect and do they got to take other courses, or is it just this process?
There is a bulletin out on that, and I'm going to defer to Zach on that, or if someone can pull that bulletin up. It was
And it is required not just for, so if I hire a company and we have a normal guy that comes, but he brings younger staff, they all need to do this?
anyone under 18 does not require a VSC.
Okay, under 18, okay.
So
So what about where I live, we have
staff that are over 18, then yes, those individuals should register as third party instructors.
Okay.
The 3 requirements for third-party instructors are in the chat.
Thank you so much. And the if you have another team, so where I live, we have a junior A team and we have a junior C team. They sometimes like to come out and mentor our kids. They don't fall under OHF, but so do they we'll never get them if they've got to go and get all this stuff, right? So I have to be able to tell
unless it's non-sanctioned junior, they do fall under the OHF. So junior A, major junior.
Well, they do, great.
Junior B and Junior C that are part of the Ontario Hockey Association, the Northern Ontario Hockey Association, or the Ontario Hockey League are all registered, so their participants are covered on insurance, and if they come out,
So
they're
they,
eligible.
as a mentor, they'd be looked after?
Yes, but you know, in this, if they are over 18 and you know, they wouldn't have gone through the screen, so you would ensure that your coaching staff are there with the players as well.
Of course, of course. So if the coach is on the ice and we bring out like one of our junior A kids to just make it fascinating for the younger kids and they shows them a couple of skills, that's totally okay because they're already insured with you.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for answering my question.
Tanya.
I'm getting some conflicting information because our Menace team is junior A in Milton, and our regional director is making them do respect in sport, gender identity, and if over 18, a vulnerable screening. And it's causing, they all want to help, but we're getting very few that want to do this time, and it's costing us a lot of money.
And I would defer if a member has put that requirement in place, then that is
Okay.
a member requirement specific for those individuals. And that's down to the member.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, would senior hockey players be allowed as well?
If they're registered with the Ontario Hockey Association, yes. So the Allen Cup loop is, and I believe there's another loop that is connected. There are a couple non-sanctioned senior leagues in Ontario. I'm trying to think of the one's the Western Senior Hockey League. I believe that's based out of kind of Stratford area. It is not sanctioned, so those individuals would have to be registered properly to be on the ice.
Okay, thank you very much.
Joanne? Joanne, do you have a
Hi,
question?
sorry, I had trouble with the mic there. I have a question. We hire a company to come in dry land training and on ice training. Do they need the third party criteria, being the vulnerable sector check, the
Yes.
gender identity and respect and sport activity leader?
Yes.
They do? Okay, thank you.
Lee?
Thanks. All the notes that are being put in the chat, I don't have access to it because of the way my Teams is set up. Can that be sent out in another fashion for us as well?
Sure. The links that we have in the chat, we'll make sure are sent out to everyone who registered for tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Joanne, you have another question or? Well, I really appreciate everyone's time tonight. I know it's not the most exciting topic. It's an important topic though, and a very valuable topic for it. If there's other questions that are not in the chat or that we have not answered, please feel free to, you know, submit those into Zach, and we'll make sure we get questions and answers back out to this group. But we really appreciate the questions. It's an important area, and from our end, it's about a collaboration between ourselves, our 7 members. So that being the Alliance, the GTHL, the NOHA, the OHA, the OHL, the OMHA, and the OWHA, and the collective 700 associations. You're the front line to the coach. You're the front line to the players, and our job is to, you know, provide the support that we can to you, and collectively be aligned in this process. So we really appreciate the time you've taken tonight out to be a support to us, and also be a support to your coaches and to the players in your associations. And feel free to put any other questions into Zach, and be happy to answer those questions if they were missed tonight.